Weapons have existed as long as humankind. For millennia, they have determined the destiny of generations. Weapons bring suffering and death. They show what humans can inflict upon other humans. But they're also intended to keep the peace and pave new ways for technology. Almost every war claims the lives of innocent people, women, children, civilians. Some weapons are developed exactly for this purpose. We're taking a look at the historical background. Why does mankind build the atomic bomb, the most terrible of all weapons?
It can actually destroy everybody. It can destroy civilization.
How were biological and chemical weapons invented?
Winning is the only thing that matters. Once you've won, nobody minds how you've won.
What sealed the fate of thousands of people living in cities and castles?
Wow, let's go and see.
Our first weapon, the trebuchet, a wonder weapon for sieges in the Middle Ages. For centuries, high castle walls pose a near insurmountable feat. One of the first technical solutions to this, siege towers.
It basically takes the attackers up to the same level as the castle wall on a rolling platform that can be pushed up against the castle wall, and the attackers can then go across a drawbridge onto the top of the castle.
But siege tower maneuvers result in a tremendous loss for the attackers, even if they outnumber the defenders.
It's not a place where men will willingly go, a large wooden tower with people firing fire arrows at you. It doesn't look good. So they're not hugely successful.
Attacks from a distance are far less perilous. With catapults, they are time-consuming but save soldiers' lives. In the 12th century, a new catapult technology from Asia conquers the battlefields. It is called trebuchet. A reconstruction in Beckdorf, Lower Saxony, Germany. Weapons expert Mike Loades is impressed.
It's the most imposing and the most iconic of all medieval siege engines. And in an age before gunpowder, this was the heavy artillery.
What makes the trebuchet so revolutionary is its efficiency.
And on the end of that beam is, in fact, a sling, and the stone sits in the sling. The principle of a sling is that it makes the levers of your arm longer and so throws further. If you were to put that sling on the end of a long stick, you would have an even longer system of levers, which is what we have here. The trouble is the beam is so big and so heavy that you need a machine to operate it. So you can think of the stone as the ammunition, the sling is the weapon, and the big wooden trebuchet is simply the engine that powers that weapon.
Building a trebuchet with medieval tools is a real challenge.
It's simply not possible to move it. A fully erected trebuchet, you can't move it.
The solution: attackers put the individual parts on ox carts to transport them to the besieged city, and then assemble the trebuchet on site.
So your military engineers would come and make the machine and use it in the place where they made it. So part of the siege would be watching the enemy build the trebuchets that would knock his walls down, and you would hope that he would say, okay, I surrender now. You know what's coming, and it's very big, and it's going to knock the wall down. So there's a psychological element as well as a physical element.
The hard work pays off. Depictions from the 12th and 13th century show how the trebuchet is used in all corners of the known world. For example, in northern Germany, Lake Danzig was located near Beckdorf, but today it has completely dried up. Back in 1311, robber baron Heinrich von Borch uses it as a hideout. The North German bishops want to take him down. Iron Heinrich, as he is also called, is able to flee from them.
Eine Koalition aus den Bischöfen.
A coalition of the bishops of Bremen and Verden and the Duke of Lüneburg is after a robber knight nicknamed Iron Heinrich, who was hiding in Danzig Castle in northwestern Germany.
Back then, bishops were clerical and political representatives, and it therefore was their duty to make sure everyone abided by the rules. Here they want to force the robber baron out of his hideout, but it's surrounded by water and protected by a wooden palisade. So they have 2 trebuchets set up along the lake shore. The intent is to destroy the fortification from a distance. Mechanics with destructive power. You just have to release the heavy weight box, and it races downwards to release the long throwing arm with the sling. But how can you actually hit a target in this manner?
If the tension doesn't decrease and the weight of the projectile remains the same, you can reproduce the shot. It will always cover the same distance, more or less.
In order to get that accuracy, you need to make stones of the same size, shape, and weight. And these are actual trebuchet stones that have been chiseled by a craftsman, by a mason, with a hammer and chisel to make them almost identical.
Almost 1,000 of these stones are used in 1311 to fight robber baron Heinrich. We want to find out how accurate and effective the trebuchet really is. We set up a palisade of tree trunks at 150 meters distance, just like Heinrich had around his castle. 4 meters high, 6 meters wide. The trunks have been placed 1 meter deep in the ground. Does the trebuchet projectile stand a chance in damaging the palisade?
This has some movement. It has some elasticity. I think that might prove quite a challenge for our stones.
It takes a whole team to operate the heaviest medieval siege weapon. Firing the trebuchet requires at least 1 trained specialist and as many hard-working assistants as possible. They have to fill the counterweight box with stones. They have to grease the firing line used to fire the projectile and bring the throwing arm into position. An historical stone taken from the siege of Lake Danzig in the year 1311 will serve as our ammunition. Fire at will.
Wow, that was so close, and it flew true. Let's go and see.
Our stone gets buried deep in the ground.
Good grief. I don't know where that stone is. It's gone down there like some monster rabbit. I mean, I can't even feel it.
But the trunks are still standing.
Der Einsatz eines Trebuchets kann sich manchmal...
Sometimes they used trebuchets for several hours or days until they had achieved the desired result.
Time, a decisive factor in every siege. Without catapults, sieges can take months or even years. Roman legions typically rely on hunger as the most potent weapon in sieges. At some point, the famine will push every opponent to the brink of despair and force them to surrender. One legendary exception to this rule is the province Judea in 73 CE. Rebellious Jews barricade themselves within the Masada fortification. The Roman Legion 10 besieges the rebels for months, in vain. It is only when the legionnaires and slaves build a massive ramp out of stones and sand up to the walls of Masada that the tides turn.
And as they moved up, the Jewish defenders kept firing at them, but eventually the Romans got to the top.
When the Roman troops eventually enter the fortress, they find the lifeless bodies of 960 insurgents. Only 2 women and 5 children are found alive.
They'd killed themselves. They weren't going to surrender, and they knew that the Romans would kill them, so they saved them the trouble.
To this day, Masada is the epitome of the Jews' quest for freedom. The ramp built by the Romans can still be seen today. Meanwhile, in Beckdorf, we are entering the second round of our experiment. The first shot was a miss. We have to aim further to the left. The trebuchet can't be moved, but the line of fire can be adjusted with a trajectory guide. Mike Loades takes a closer look at this crucial detail of the weapon, together with his experienced trebuchet assistant, Patrick.
And then you can move the whole line, left and right.
Going to there, I only need to move that a little bit, and over distance.
Very small.
Very small can make several meters difference.
Of course.
Yeah.
You have to think about 1 centimeter here is about 2 meters behind there. I hope we can do it.
You are the right hands.
We will try it again.
Thank you.
Positioning the throwing arm, charging the catapult with a new stone, and fire. The projectile travels too far. We remove a couple of stones from the counterweight box. This reduces the firing velocity and also the reach.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Will it work this time? A clear hit. The stone goes straight into the wooden palisade.
We have a hit, and let's see what it's done. Just look at this. It's just gone down like matchsticks, as if these great timbers were nothing. They're just shattered. Here's the real damage. Here, on this one. Here, this is where the stone must have struck, and it's just splintered this timber. The walls are now breached, and the opposing army will be on its way.
Our trebuchet has hit the wood, 20 centimeters thick, and destroyed it. Just like it did 700 years ago. Back then, the troops of the North German bishops managed to penetrate the protective palisade of Iron Heinrich with 2 trebuchets. The robber baron is thrown into the dungeon. But destruction is not always the objective of sieges.
You actually want the castle because it's a useful strategic tool. So if you can persuade them to surrender by frightening them, that's much better.
In 1346, Tartarian troops make use of a particularly perfidious tactic. They are besieging the city of Kaffa in Crimea and want to bring the plague behind the enemy walls. But how are they able to do this without infecting themselves?
They understood it was a contagious disease, so they protected their hands, for example. That means they could transport the dead bodies of plague victims to a trebuchet basically without any problem, without putting themselves in danger.
Using trebuchets, the besiegers throw infected corpses over the walls of Kaffa. The message is clear.
Surrender now or we'll kill you all. This is classic siege warfare. So it's psychological, it's biological, and ultimately it's remarkably barbaric.
This is how the trebuchet becomes a part of a particularly insidious way of warfare. Biological and chemical weapons have existed since antiquity, and the attempts to outlaw such attacks probably go back just as far. Greece, 6th century BCE. The Oracle of Delphi is the Greeks' most important sacred site, attracting pilgrims and guidance seekers alike. The coastal town of Kira benefits from conducting business with the pilgrims. However, an alliance of the powerful city of Athens wants to seize the earnings from Delphi. They besiege Kira. According to historical reports, the attackers are using a weapon that can be obtained straight from the ground. They throw hellebore roots into the Pleistos River that runs through Kira, an attack with serious repercussions.
The consequences of a hellebore poisoning: vomiting, nausea, vertigo, and of course diarrhea. And everyone knows that vomiting and diarrhea cause dehydration after a certain amount of time, and the body will become very weak due to this.
In next to no time, half of the residents of Kira are bedridden. It's impossible for them to defend their city any longer. The attackers kill all of them and raze the entire city to the ground.
Any means of getting an advantage and anything that will disable the enemy, demoralize them, weaken them, these are all good things because winning is the only thing that matters. Once you've won, nobody minds how you've won.
Another historical example of biological warfare. In 1267, the Mongols besieged the Chinese city of Xianyang. The Chinese fight tooth and nail. They also use a weapon originally developed for attacks. They call it Fen Fao Quan Fa, which means feces throwing bomb. It proves particularly effective in sieges. The most important ingredient, dried human excrement that is set on fire and thrown at the enemy. Everybody knows that horrid odors can cause strong reactions. But is it really possible to put the enemy to rout with stench alone? Medieval Chinese documents describe how such stink bombs were manufactured. Weapons expert Mike Loades wants to try out the recipe.
The first evidence we've got for the stink pot comes from China in 1044. It's a recorded use. And we have a number of recipes, all sorts of acids and plants. Here's one that was commonly used, aconite. And it's the roots that are deadly poisonous. If you ingest those roots, then it causes stomach hemorrhaging. Your stomach bleeds, your intestines bleed. It causes terrible, terrible suffering. And another common ingredient was the Heliocopris beetle. These nasty little fellows, it feeds on waste and it absorbs poison. And so when cut apart, there are all sorts of poisonous properties with that. Tung oil, deadly poisonous from the tung tree in Southeast Asia and China. Lime, basic chalk, but when that's heated to very high temperatures, that itself becomes a deadly substance. If it mixes with the moist parts of the body, like the tears of the eyes or mucus in the nose, or you get it mixed with the saliva in the throat, that becomes a deadly burning acid. So this is all very noxious substances, and they are all mixed together, pulverized with human feces. I'm happy to say the producers have given me horse dung to demonstrate with, and this is the fuel. When dried, this becomes a unpleasant smelling fuel that will burn. And it was the burning excrement that created the smoke that carried the toxic substances from the plants and the beetles. And that is what got into the enemy's eyes, it got into their lungs, it got into their stomachs, and it made them run out of the buildings, run out of the ships. The purpose of the stink pot was to get people out of a place without destroying the place. Horrible, disgusting, cowardly, shameful chemical warfare.
The recipes vary. Biological and chemical warfare begin with many malodorous experiments.
So they've got a clear advantage over their enemy, who is a less sophisticated society with less knowledge of these techniques. So it gives them an edge, and that's what they're looking for. That's why they use it.
For centuries, warlords continued to commission new experiments with gaseous warfare agents. Producing them efficiently at a large scale is, however, not possible yet. The most far-reaching biological attack in history was actually an accident. In 1492, Christopher Columbus doesn't disembark in India as intended, but rather reaches a whole new continent. For the indigenous population, this marks the beginning of a catastrophe. An ever-growing number of Europeans set out for America. They bring in bacteria and viruses that prove perilous for large populations of indigenous Americans whose immune systems cannot cope. Within only a couple of decades, as many as 15 million people die from diseases such as the measles or flu. But in some cases, European conquerors intentionally used viruses as a weapon. For example, in Pennsylvania in 1763. Indian tribes are besieging Fort Pitt. Some of the British colonizers inside the fort suffer from smallpox. Their commander-in-chief, Geoffrey Amherst, knows of the disastrous effects of smallpox among the Indian tribes.
They intentionally gave blankets used by people with smallpox to First Nation tribes who didn't have any antibodies against this disease, with disastrous impact on their ability to defend themselves.
Targeted biological warfare. The Indians are forced to end the siege of Fort Pitt. Summer 1914. World War I brings about entirely new forms of warfare on all levels. German chemist Fritz Haber intends to seal the fate of battles with gas. On the 22nd of April 1915, a pale yellow cloud drifts over the battlefield towards the French front lines in Flanders, Belgium. Under the observing eyes of Haber himself, German troops release 150 tons of chlorine gas.
Chlorine gas was actually just a byproduct of the synthetic dye-making process, and then they found out it can serve other purposes too. It's a very dangerous weapon that can cause death by suffocation.
More than 1,000 French soldiers die. Several thousands are injured.
The Germans were the first, but the British and French were quite happy to retaliate.
Industrial production renders large-scale gas war possible. Thousands of tons of gas are produced, but also millions of gas masks. They're supposed to protect the soldiers from chlorine gas. But in 1917, the Germans deploy a new agent, Uperite, also known as mustard gas.
Mustard gas was extremely effective because it reacts upon contact with the human skin. It causes blisters and burns. What was really vicious about this weapon was that gas masks were useless against it. It was about contact with skin.
The fear of deadly gas clouds marks the experiences of an entire generation. Poison gas kills about 100,000 people in World War I and leaves more than 1 million injured. US nurse Shirley Millard writes about everyday life in the gas war in her diary. They just struggle for breath. Nothing can be done. Their lungs are gone, literally burned out. Some with their eyes and faces entirely eaten away by the gas. After the end of World War I, a new peace order is meant to prevent the bloodshed of millions from ever happening again. In 1920, 32 states form an organization called the League of Nations. In 1925, they agree on prohibiting the use of chemical and biological weapons. But the League of Nations proves to be too weak. By the mid-30s, it becomes increasingly clear that the world is on the brink of yet another major war with countless victims. 25th of June 1945, in Europe, World War II is over. 50 countries found the United Nations in San Francisco. The new organization has the same purpose as its predecessor, securing peace. But this time it is supposed to work, and the UN have proven to withstand the test of time. By 2017, there are 193 member states. They have signed the Charter of the United Nations with all its rights and obligations. UN soldiers are deployed to make sure the rules are observed. Their mission, however, typically does not involve combat. Their job is to observe and to secure peace. Step by step, joint treaties promote the prohibition of chemical and biological weapons. But not all states honor the agreements, just like Nazi Germany in the 1930s and 40s, producing chemical weapons like sarin or tabun despite the ban. It remains one of the big riddles of World War II. Both sides are fighting bitterly, but all chemical agents remain unused.
In the Second World War, nobody uses poison gas. Not because they don't have it, but because there's no particular utility in using something everybody has, and it won't advantage anybody strategically.
In the last months of the war, Hitler wants to take all the Germans down with him. He sends everyone to the front lines, old men and boys alike. He intends to destroy Germany's infrastructure. Influential military officers ultimately suggest attacking the enemies with gas. Hitler doesn't heed their advice, perhaps because he also fell victim to a gas attack in World War I and temporarily lost his sight. The Germans are spared a potential retaliation attack from the Allies that would probably have involved not only poisonous gas, but also biological agents. Anthrax, a rod-shaped bacterium. Inhaling the spores can prove lethal.
The problem is that when the symptoms manifest themselves, the disease has usually progressed so much that it may already be too late to treat it directly, even immediately after detection.
Scotland, 1942. On the uninhabited island of Gruinard, the British are testing the effects of the anthrax bacterium on sheep. The plan: airplanes drop anthrax-infested animal food made out of flax seeds all over Germany. The spores would spread rapidly. Moribund animals would cause a famine. all of the 80 sheep on Gruinard die. A large-scale anthrax attack on Germany would have been possible.
What I imagine is the case is that had Germany started using these weapons against Britain, the British wanted to be in a position to retaliate immediately, but it's highly unlikely they would have initiated an exchange of these weapons.
Germany is defeated with conventional weapons. The development of chemical and biological weapons, however, persists after 1945. So too does the fear of an attack. In the late 50s, scientists commissioned by the US Office of Civil and Defense Mobilization develop a bioweapon mask. It is designed to filter the air before inhalation during an emergency. Its user-friendly design is demonstrated to people everywhere, but the masks are never used. The danger, however, remains real, also decades later. New York, 2001. 1 week after the 9/11 terror attacks. Newspaper agencies, broadcasting companies, and senators receive letters with a sinister message. You cannot stop us. We have this anthrax. You die now. Are you afraid? Death to America. Death to Israel. Allah is great. The letters contain anthrax spores. 22 people are infected. 5 of them die. Is this the next attack by Al-Qaeda terrorists? US President George W. Bush shows his determination.
The American people need to go about their lives. We cannot let the terrorists lock our country down.
But everything is different than it seems. The FBI believes the spores came from a laboratory in Maryland. The scientist Bruce Edwards Ivins becomes their main suspect. But before they can question him, he commits suicide. If or why he sent the anthrax letters remains a mystery. During the Cold War, both sides developed even deadlier warfare agents despite all international conventions. The nerve agent VX is one such example. Invented as an insecticide, it is 20 times more poisonous than the toxic substance sarin produced during World War II. In the 60s, US soldiers used training films to practice for emergencies. Upon contact with nerve agents, only injecting an antidote can help. But it has to be the right one. March 1988, the Iraqi Air Force under Saddam Hussein drops poisonous gas bombs over the city of Halabja. The dictator suspects that the Kurds are defecting and must therefore be punished. 3,000 to 5,000 people lose their lives. Men, women, and children. Since 2013, poison gas has also been used in the Syrian civil war. Western states accuse dictator Bashar al-Assad of attacking rebel strongholds with poisonous gas. Assad and his allies dismiss the allegations as propaganda by the opponents. But independent experts, the WHO or Doctors Without Borders, confirm the suspicions. Biological and chemical weapons, for the great powers of the 20th century, they are not the most important means of mass destruction. The search for the most effective of all weapons brings about unthinkable dimensions of destruction, the atomic bomb. 16th of July 1945, a desert in New Mexico. The Americans want to test a prototype of a new bomb. Code name of the experiment, Trinity. The first nuclear bomb in history. It's the dawn of a new era. Los Alamos, New Mexico. Top researchers have worked relentlessly on the bomb so the US would have it before Germany. The basic principle? Physics.
Uran-235 zum Beispiel hat einen sehr großen...
Uranium-235, for example, has quite a large nucleus containing 235 of these small atoms. Another part of the nucleus are neutrons. If you shoot a neutron at this nucleus, it causes a fission. The nucleus splits into two smaller nuclei. This releases energy, not a whole lot, but enough to be measured, setting free 3 neutrons. If these 3 neutrons hit another uranium nucleus, they will produce the same effect again. This can set off a chain reaction. And if a critical mass is achieved, that means when there are enough uranium nuclei packed together, this chain reaction self-perpetuates. That alone is already perilous. But if I were to increase the mass, I can achieve what is called a supercritical mass. And then the chain reaction not only sustains itself, it increases exponentially, releasing an incredible amount of energy.
The first nuclear bomb uses plutonium to achieve this. It is surrounded by a normal explosive. Once the explosive is ignited, the plutonium is compressed. This produces a fission reaction. The bomb has explosive capabilities equivalent to 20,000 tons of conventional explosives. The US military has identified various targets for a nuclear attack in Germany. But in May 1945, the war in Europe comes to an end. The Germans are spared the atomic bomb. In the Pacific, however, the fighting continues. The Japanese army has basically been defeated, but is unwilling to surrender.
In Japan des Zweiten Weltkrieges herrscht...
In World War II, the Japanese are convinced that surrendering is dishonorable. They think they owe it to their emperor to fight until the bitter end and to sacrifice their lives if necessary. Of course, this makes it really, really hard to bring a state like Japan to its knees.
US President Truman commissions the dropping of nuclear bombs on Japan. Unlike in the Trinity test, the bomb Little Boy carries a uranium bullet. In order to reach the supercritical mass of uranium, the bullet contains an additional uranium cylinder. Little Boy weighs just 64 kilograms, but has the explosive power of 15,000 tons of TNT. 6th of August 1945. An American B-29 bomber leaves the Pacific island of Tinian at 8:15 a.m. Little Boy annihilates Hiroshima. Three days later, the plutonium bomb Fat Man explodes over Nagasaki. The heat and blast waves of the bombs are devastating. Then there's the radiation. More than 160,000 people die instantly. The Japanese Minister of Foreign Affairs signs the surrender documents on the 2nd of September 1945. With the atomic bomb, the US emerges as the victor of World War II on 2 fronts.
The Americans had to have a knockout. They had to finish the war with something really big and quite spectacular. The Japanese know they've lost, but the Americans don't realize they've won until those bombs go off, and then they know they've won the war.
All that is left from Hiroshima and Nagasaki are contaminated ruins. In the months and years following the attacks, tens of thousands die from long-term consequences of the attack. with acute radiation syndrome being the most common cause of death.
Die radioaktive Strahlung hat eine
Nuclear radiation affects cell proliferation. You start bleeding from the nose, from the oral mucosa. It affects the bowel tissue, the entire gastrointestinal tract. The radiation is most harmful to the blood itself. The number of red blood cells drops, and so does the number of platelets. In the end, the entire bone marrow basically dissolves or can no longer regenerate. And without the bone marrow, our immune system fails completely.
Doctors are helpless.
You can try and stabilize the blood count, you can transplant bone marrow, but the overall symptoms and progression depend on how high the original radiation exposure was and how long you were exposed to it.
For decades, more people developed cancer in Hiroshima and Nagasaki than in the rest of the country. Nuclear weapons have only been used once, but the horrors they caused leave their mark on an entire era. The US military conducts another nuclear test with the bomb Baker on the 25th of July, 1946. Back then, only few people know that the nuclear arms race is already in full swing. The Soviet Union is the first to follow suit. On the 29th of August 1949, the first communist atomic bomb is successfully tested. A third nuclear world war seems to be a real danger. In the East and West, even children prepare for the worst-case scenario.
He did what we all must learn to do. You and you and you and you. Duck and cover.
I remember being a child and having been shown videos at school of what to do in the case of an atomic bomb. And so therefore we had this fear. We didn't really understand it, but we were terrified of it.
Protests fall. Like here in New York in 1960. Nuclear opponents from all corners of the Western world demand the prohibition of all nuclear weapons.
People don't think, oh, it's them over there fighting the war. It can actually destroy everybody. It can destroy civilization. It's almost become this ultimate fear factor.
The demonstrations remain fruitless.
People became alarmed and they started to think about disarmament, they started to think about peace, they started to think about ways they could avoid the risk of war. The problem was that the people who were thinking about this the most clearly were, of course, the military and the politicians, and they'd worked out that the best way to stop war was to be so powerful that nobody would dare to start one.
The superpowers continue to arm themselves. They develop hydrogen bombs, also known as H-bombs, that are 1,000 times more powerful than the nuclear bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Mankind is now able to eradicate itself completely. The principle of the new superbomb. 2 hydrogen isotopes combine and form one single new atom. This process, releasing vast amounts of energy, is called a fusion. The fusion is only possible at extreme temperatures, generated by the detonation of a normal nuclear bomb. This fission causes the fusion of the hydrogen cylinder, a weapon whose force parallels that of the sun. In the 1980s, the Soviet Union and the USA have an arsenal of more than 70,000 nuclear weapons. US President Ronald Reagan justifies the enormous costs.
That budget is much more than a long list of numbers. For behind all the numbers lies America's ability to prevent the greatest of human tragedies and preserve our free way of life in a sometimes dangerous world.
The enemies could annihilate each other several times over with the nuclear weapons they possess. But eventually, the superpowers come round.
2 rational actors realize that they have nothing to gain by exchanging nuclear weapons.
At the Lawrence Livermore Laboratory in California, the nuclear tests of the past can be seen to this very day. Every test conducted by the US was filmed, and the reels were stored as top-secret records. Nuclear physicist Greg Spriggs and film technician Jim Moy want to change this. Declassifying the unique film material is one part of their job.
All of the films that we have declassified will be posted on our Livermore YouTube site so that people can see the films and can see what we're seeing.
The explosions were documented, and in surprising detail, considering the technical capabilities of film analysis of the time. Jim Moy has already digitized more than 4,000 reels from over 210 nuclear tests.
They recorded a lot. I don't know how they could even have foreseen how this would be used in the future.
Once the images are digitized, Greg Spriggs' work begins. Information on the recordings, like from the distance between the camera and the detonation center or the size of the bomb, provide a great deal of insight into the state of research back then. The only 2 times nuclear bombs were used against people date back more than 70 years. But the ensuing ethical discussion is still relevant to this very day.
Yeah, they killed a lot of people there, but someone could argue that it saved a lot of lives in the end because it ended the war sooner. Because who knows how long the Japanese would have fought without having a weapon like this aimed against them.
Greg Spriggs does more than just documenting history. He is convinced that we can only improve nuclear bombs by learning more about their effects.
We need to be able to tell the Department of Defense, this is what's going to happen if you drop this size weapon on this particular target. And if somebody happens to bomb us, we're going to understand what the effect is, and if we have to retaliate against them, they should know that we're probably going to destroy them.
Peace through deterrence. To this day, the US is a fierce advocate of this strategy. In 2017, they maintain an arsenal of 6,800 atomic warheads. It has been working, until now.
Now they've fallen into the hands of irrational actors who have different agendas, and it does pose a problem. There is no case study we can make to see how that works. What we know about heavily armed rogue states in the past is that they end up starting wars, and we have to hope that these ones don't.
A balancing act with dangerous consequences. Almost 15,000 nuclear weapons in 9 countries are supposed to make our planet a safe place. We can only hope that reason will prevail. But in the meantime, new weapons exist that can also hit entire nations, with fatal repercussions for millions of people. Digitization has reached nearly every sphere of life. Access is digitally secured. This also applies to the weapons industry. The control over centrifuges used to enrich uranium is just one example. American and/or Israeli experts launched an attack on Iranian nuclear facilities in 2009. With the help of a digital weapon, the computer virus Stuxnet brings the centrifuges to a stillstand. The Iranian nuclear program is sabotaged.
This is the kind of warfare that's been practiced since the dawn of time. Intelligence dominance equals blackout equals ignorance equals defeat.
State secrets can also fall victim to digital attacks. Countries are rearming themselves again, but this time not with tanks and rifles. Cybersecurity is becoming increasingly crucial. Cyber warfare can have far-reaching consequences, not only in the digital world, but also in the world in which we live.